of the show tonight, so I apologize for that. Let's get into the topic. Tonight's topic is Serapis. Serapis, or Serapis, is a Coptic amalgamation of Osiris and Apsis, the bull. It's a Greco-Egyptian deity, much like we talked about Hermes Trismegistus being an amalgamation of Thoth and Hermes, and then anthropomorphized rather than these animal-headed gods that the Egyptians. The Greeks weren't into these animal-headed gods, so when the Greeks conquered Egypt, they didn't dig all the animal-headed god things. So they tried to kind of replace them with more human-looking gods.
Okay.
That's where you get the thrice great Hermes, and that's where you get Serapis. The cult of Serapis was introduced during the 3rd century BC on the orders of the pharaoh Ptolemy I Soter of the Ptolemaic kingdom. And this was done as a means to unify the Greeks and Egyptians in his realm. Now, a Serapeum was any temple or religious precinct devoted to Serapis. Now, you'll note the name Serapeum has come up on this show before, predominantly in our discussion about the Library of Alexandria. When the Library of Alexandria was burned the first time, the Serapeum there was used to house some of the documents and relics and artifacts from the Library of Alexandria. So the Serapeum of Alexandria in the Ptolemaic kingdom was an ancient Greek temple built by Ptolemy III Eucrates. There are also signs of Harpocrates, and it has been referred to as the daughter of the Library of Alexandria, and it existed until the end of the 4th century. So it did house some of the great works from the Library of Alexandria. So that's where you've heard the term Serapeum before. And there were lots of Serapeums. You had Serapeums in Egypt, in Alexandria, Saqqara, and Canopus. You had Serapeums in Italy. You had Serapeums in Turkey. So it wasn't like they were just in one place. So they did survive, and there's ruins of them all around the ancient world. You know, Turkey back then was called Anatolia in most cases. So they were around. The cult of Serapis was spread as a matter of deliberate policy by the Ptolemaic kings, who also built the immense Serapeum of Alexandria. As I just mentioned, the daughter library of the Library of Alexandria. So the Serapis continued to increase in popularity during the Roman Empire, often replacing Osiris as the consort of Isis in temples outside of Egypt. So that's how popular he became. Now imagine how popular, you got to imagine how popular Isis is. Isis is the most popular female deity in the Egyptian pantheon. The most popular. And that was the case for a very long time. Now, is she the most important? That's a question for another day, but some would say Ma'at is just as important in that regard. However, Serapis, to be replacing Osiris as the consort of Isis in temples, is a huge deal and shows how prominent this figure became in the kind of Greco-Roman time period. The Serapis was depicted as Greek in appearance but with Egyptian trappings and combined iconography from many great cults, signifying both abundance and, guess what, resurrection. A very popular theme, resurrected gods. People always like the idea of their gods coming back from the dead. Ptolemy I may have created the official cult of Serapis and endorsed him as a patron of the Ptolemaic dynasty in Alexandria. Serapis was a synchronistic deity derived from the worship of the Egyptian Osiris and Apis, and also granted attributes from other deities, such as powers linked to Hades and Demeter, and a benevolence linked to Dionysus. There's evidence that the cult of Serapis existed before the Ptolemies came to power in Alexandria. The Temple of Serapis in Egypt is mentioned in 323 BC by both Plutarch in the Life of Alexander and Arrian in Anabastis 7. The common assertion is that Ptolemy created this deity is derived from sources which describe him as erecting a statue of Serapis in Alexandria. This statue enriched the texture of the Serapis conception by portraying him in both Egyptian and Greek style. In 389, here they come. Here they come. Guess who comes along? Who comes along in the ancient world and decides that things aren't going the way they like, so they got to destroy stuff? Well, in 389, it was the Christians. And a mob led by the Pope Theophilus of Alexandria, destroyed the Serapeum of Alexandria. The cult survived until all forms of pagan religion were suppressed under Theodosius I in 391. The wily Christians come out of nowhere to destroy the Serapeum of Alexandria, much like they destroyed the Library of Alexandria. You know, if it was pagan, it had to go. And then once you got these Christian emperors, they just outlawed paganism straight up outright. There was the Dionysian persecution that we talked about before, and now the Theodosian persecution as well, where he suppressed all pagan religions. Now, I did a video about Julian the Apostate. As a sidebar, just here, Julian the Apostate, because I'm thinking about these Roman emperors. Julian was raised Christian and felt like Rome had lost its way, and it needed to return to its religious roots and back to its values to find its way again. So what he did was he passed edicts to make it really hard to be a Christian and get involved in politics. But he was wily. He let Christian bishops come back that had been exiled. He didn't outright persecute them like the way that previous Roman emperors had done, but he did open up the pagan temples again. And he did shut down the Christian houses of worship. So that's what he did do. In the end, he dies. And I believe his last words were, "You have won, Galilean." You know, that Jesus finally defeated him.
Epic.
As well. Yeah, epic story. So yeah, check out that video if you haven't seen it. Julian the Apostate. Pretty interesting video that I made there. So anyway, back to Serapis. The name of the deity is derived from the syncretic worship of Osiris and the bull Apis. As a single deity, under the Egyptian name Usercheb, this name was later written in Coptic as Usherhapi, and Serapis was the most common form in ancient Greek until Roman times, when Serapis became common. The most renowned Serapeum was in Alexandria. Under Ptolemy I Soter, efforts were made to integrate Egyptian religion with that of the Hellenistic rulers. The Ptolemy's policy was to find a deity that should win reverence alike of both groups, despite the curse of the Egyptian priest against the gods of a previous foreign ruler, Set, who was lauded by the Hyksos. Alexander the Great had attempted to use Amun for this purpose, but he was more prominent in Upper Egypt and not as popular in the Lower Egypt. The Greeks had stronger influence. The Greeks had little respect for animal-headed figures, and so the Greek-style anthropomorphic statue was chosen as the idol and proclaimed as the equivalent of the highly popular Apis. It was named Usherhapi, i.e. Osiris Apis, which became Greek Serapis, and was said to be Osiris in full rather than just his Ka, which is his life force. Now, Ka is one of the many concepts of the Egyptian soul. They believed that the Egyptian soul was made of many parts.
Scan detected.
So, Ka being only one aspect of it. You had Hit, Sh, Jeb, Ba, Swit, Shem, Ren, Ankh, and Ka. So you have at least 9 different aspects to the soul. Ka was your body double, but Serapis wasn't the body double of Osiris. Serapis wasn't a spirit. Serapis was Osiris in full. Rather than just his life force. So, the earliest mention of Serapis occurs in the disputed death scene of Alexander the Great in 323 BC. Here, Serapis has a temple at Babylon and is of such importance that he alone is being named as being consulted on behalf of the dying king. The presence in Serapis in Babylon would radically alter perceptions of the mythologies of this era. The unconnected Babylonian god Ea, or Enki, was titled Ser Apis, meaning king of Apsu, or the watery deep, and perhaps he is the one mentioned in the diaries. His significance in the Hellenistic psyche, due to his involvement in Alexander's death, may have also contributed to the choice of Osiris Apis as the chief Ptolemaic god. According to Plutarch, Ptolemy stole the cult statue from Sinope in Asia Minor, having been instructed in a dream by the unknown god to bring the statue to Alexandria, where the statue was pronounced to be Serapis by two religious experts. One of the experts was Eulmonopide, the ancient family whose members of the Hierophant of the Eleusinian Mysteries, Eleusinian Mysteries, had been chosen since before history. And the other was the scholarly Egyptian priest Manetheo, which gave weight to the judgment for both the Egyptians and the Greeks. So, let's break this down a little bit for you. The Eumolpidne were a family of priests at Eleusis. The Eleusinian Mysteries were a Greek mystery religion, all right? This Greek mystery religion held initiations every year for the cult of Demeter and Persephone, based on the Pan-Hellenic sanctuary of Eleusis in ancient Greece. They made the most famous of the secret religious rites of Greece. Their basis was an old agrarian cult, and there is some evidence they were derived from the religious practices of the Mycenaean period. The mysteries represented the myth of the abduction of Persephone from her mother Demeter by the king of the underworld Hades, in a cycle with three phases: the descent, the search, and the ascent, with the main theme being ascent. The ascent of Persephone and the reunion with her mother. It was a major festival during the Hellenistic era and later spread to Rome. Similar religious rites appeared in the agricultural societies of the Near East and Minoan Crete. The rites, ceremonies, and beliefs were kept secret and constantly preserved from antiquity. For the initiated, the rebirth of Persephone symbolized the eternity of life, which flows from generation to generation, and they believed they would have a reward in the afterlife. There are many paintings and pieces of pottery that depict various aspects of the mysteries. Since the mysteries involve visions and conjuring of an afterlife, some scholars believe that the power and longevity of the Eleusinian mysteries, a constant set of rites, ceremonies, and experiences that spanned 2 millennia, came from psychedelic drugs. The name of the town, Eleusis, seems to be pre-Greek, and it is probably a counterpart with Elysium. So I did a video on the Eleusinian mysteries as well. These are fascinating mystery schools that existed in ancient Greece. And I want you to understand, and really want you to think about this. For as long as people have been Christians, from the time of Christ until now, people had been members of the cult of the Eleusinian mysteries. They lasted for over 2,000 years. People worshiped this religion. And everybody who practiced it had once in their life to make a pilgrimage to Eleusis to practice the religion at least once. They had to go become initiated. This was a very long-standing religion, and this was very important to the Greeks for a very long time. And do not think for a second that these ancient Greek mystery schools have not influenced religions that have come after and still persist to this day. Do not doubt that for a second. Don't even doubt that your own religion hasn't been influenced by them, because I assure you, they all have. Now, Manetheo, that you mentioned the Egyptian priest Manetheo. Manetheo is believed to be an Egyptian priest from Sebennytos. He lived during the Ptolemaic kingdom in the early 3rd century during the Hellenistic period. He authored the history of Egypt in Greek, a major chronological source for the reigns of the pharaohs of ancient Egypt. It is unclear if he wrote his work during the reign of Ptolemy I Soter or Ptolemy II Philadelphos, but no later than Ptolemy III Eucrates. Only 2 full English translations of Manetheo's history of Egypt have been published, by William Gideon Walden in 1940, by Gerald P. Verboget and John Moore Wickersham in 2001. No sources for the dates of his life and death remain. He is only associated with Ptolemy I Soter by Plutarch, while George Synesius links Manetho with Ptolemy II Philadelphus. If the mention of someone named Manetho in the Hyber Papyri, dated 241 to 240 BC, is in fact the celebrated author of the history of Egypt, then Manetho may have well been working during the reign of Ptolemy III Eucrates, but as well, he would have been at a very advanced age. He was described as a native Egyptian, with Egyptian being his mother tongue. Though the topics he supposedly wrote about dealt with Egyptian matters, he is said to have written exclusively in the Greek language for a Greek-speaking audience. He was probably a priest of the sun god Ra at Heliopolis. He was considered by Plutarch to be an authority on the cult of Serapis. Serapis itself was a Greco-Macedonian version of the Egyptian cult, probably started after Alexander the Great's establishment at Alexandria and Egypt. The statue of the god was imported in 286 by Ptolemy I Soter, or in 278 BC by Ptolemy II Philadelphus, as Tacitus and Plutarch attest. There was also tradition in antiquity that Timotheus of Athena, an authority on Demeter at Eleusis, directed the project together with Manetho. But the source of this information is not clear and may originate from one of the literary works attributed to Manetho, in which case it has no independent value and does not corroborate the historic Manetho, the priest historian of the early 3rd century. So you can see Manetho is very important, and the Eleusinian Mysteries, the Hierophant of the Eleusinian Mysteries, is also an important role too. So to have both the Hierophant of the Eleusinian Mysteries and the Egyptian priest Manetho say, okay, this statue that you stole and brought back here to Alexandria is Serapis, was a weighty thing. And this weighty judgment would have resonated with both the Egyptians and the Greeks. But Plutarch may not be correct. Some Egyptologists allege that Sinope in the tale is really the hin of Sinopenia, a name given to the site of the already existing Serapeum at Memphis. According to Tacitus, Serapis, i.e. Apis, explicitly identified as Osiris in full, has been the god of the village of Rhachiotis before it expanded into the greater capital of Alexandria. The statue subtly depicted a figure resembling Hades or Pluto, both being kings of the Greek underworld, and was shown enthroned with a Madius, a basket or grain measure on his head. Now, if you saw the thumbnail for this video, you'll notice the guy was wearing a flower pot on his head. That is a Madius, a basket or a grain measure. He was a Greek symbol for the land of the dead. He also held a scepter in his hand indicating rulership, with Cerberus, the gatekeeper of the underworld, resting at his feet. This statue also had what appeared to be a serpent at its base, fitting the Egyptian symbol of rulership, the Uraeus. With his wife, or Osiris's wife, Isis, and their son Horus, in the form of Harpocrates, Serapis won an important place in the Greek world. In his 2nd century AD depiction of Greece, Pausanias notes 2 Serapia on the slopes of Corinth, above the rebuilt Roman city of Corinth at one Copia in Boeotia. Serapis figured among the international deities whose cult was received and disseminated through the Roman Empire, with Anubis sometimes identified with Serapis. At Rome, Serapis was worshipped in the Assyrium Campanicia, a sanctuary of Isis built during the 2nd Triumvirate in the Campus Martius. The Roman cult of Isis and Serapis gained popularity late in the 1st century when Vespasian experienced events he attributed to their miraculous agency while he was in Alexandria, where he stayed on before returning to Rome as emperor in 70. From the Flavian dynasty on, Serapis was one of the deities who might appear on imperial coinage with the reigning emperor. The main cult of Alexandria survived until the 4th century when a Christian mob destroyed the Serapeum of Alexandria in 385. The Theodosian decree of 380 implicitly included the cult in its general proscriptions of religions other than approved forms of the Nicene Christianity. So that's how it went down for poor Serapis. Got a good maybe 100, 150 years where he was worshipped, and then the Christians came along, and that was that. No more Serapis for you. So let's take a look at some images here. I do want to share this image of you. I'll talk about a flower pot on his head. It's called a grain measure. Joseph Aldridge for $1.99. Thank you, Joseph Aldridge. Joseph Aldridge says the Greeks kicked the furries. I don't know what that means. It's just a mystery. This head was recovered from near Alexandria. This is a head of Serapis, and you can see the grain measure on top of it.
I mean,
This came from a rather large statue.
How tall is it? Does it say?
I believe the statue was, let's see, how big was the statue? 12 feet.
What?
Yeah, it was a 12-foot statue.
Wow. It's a
Yeah,
big
that's
ass
pretty
head.
common. They do that all the time back in the ancient times.
oh yeah, like statues of Zeus and
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean,
yes.
yeah, actually Zeus was like a very huge statue.
Okay.
One of the wonders of the ancient world was the Zeus statue.
Yeah. But this begs the question, say what you want about Seraphis, but man had good posture with that on his head.
That's right. That's right, Brian.
You'd have to have to walk around with that thing at all times.
Devo must love him.
Must have had a little strap around his chin.
Chin strap.
Chin strap.
So
Probably
simply put,
popularized it.
Serapis was an invented god. He was a composite of several Egyptian and Hellenistic deities who was introduced in the world at the beginning of the Ptolemaic period in Egypt during the reign of Ptolemy I. And though his legacy lasted well into the Roman period, he was meant to form a bridge between Greek and Egyptian religion in a new age in which their respective gods were brought face to face with each other. So both Egyptians and Greeks could find union in a specific supreme entity. Linguistically, the god's name is a function of Osiris and the bull Apis, which, by the Greek period, might be said to have represented the essence of Egyptian religion. In fact, a cult of this combination god, named Osiris, or Ushur-Hapi, or Ashur-Hapi, has existed in Egypt prior to the rule of the Ptolemies. Osiris was basically the sacred bull of Memphis after his death. According to the hieroglyphic texts, which were found in the steles and other objects of the Serapeum and Saqqara, established long before the Greek period, Apis is called the life of Osiris, the Lord of Heaven, Tem, with his horns in his head, and he is said to give life, strength, and health to thy nostrils forever. Elsewhere from the 18th dynasty, Osiris is described as the great god Khent, Amentet, the Lord of Life forever. Apis and Osiris were joined together by the priest of Memphis, where the attributes of Apis had made to assume a funeral character and hence recognized as god of the underworld. A monument of the 19th dynasty, Apis is said to be the renewed life of Ptah. And in an inscription from the 25th dynasty, he is called the second Ptah. In the same text, we have mentions of the temple of Ashur-Hapi, or Osiris, and it is clear that his identity has been merged with that of Osiris. The identification of Apis with Osiris was easy enough, because one of the most common names of Osiris was the Bull of the West. Apis was, in fact, believed to be animated by the soul of Osiris and to be Osiris incarnate. The appearance of a new Apis was regarded as a new manifestation of Osiris upon the earth. However, the Greeks added to this Egyptian core a number of Hellenistic deities, including Zeus, Helios, Dionysus, Hades, and Asclepius, to form Serapis. Eventually, these Hellenistic deities would predominate the god's final form. He then emerged as a supreme god of divine majesty and the sun, Zeus and Helios, fertility, Dionysus, the underworld and the afterlife, as well as healing, Hades and Asclepius, and however his attributes regard the afterlife and fertility, they were always primary to his nature. In the city on the borders of Egypt was boast Alexander of Macedon as its founder. Serapis and Isis were worshipped with a reverence that was almost fanatical. Evidence that the sun, under the name Serapis, is the object of all reverence is either the basket set on his head or the figure of a three-headed creature placed by his statue. The middle head of this figure, which is also the largest, represents a lion. On the right, a dog raises its head with a gentle and fawning air, and on the left, the neck ends in the head of a ravening wolf. All three beasts are joined together by the coils of a serpent, whose head returns to the god's right hand, which keeps the monster in check. Microbius, Saturnalia, 1/2013. The iconography of Serapis was dominated by Hellenistic features. In his anthropomorphic form, he was represented as a man wearing a Greek-style robe with a Greek hairstyle and a full beard. Surmounting his head was often a basket or a tall, dry corn measure holding a quarter of a bushel, representing his fertility attributes as well as his association with Osiris, who was sometimes a god of rain. At times, he was also provided with a curved ram's horns. At his feet might also sit the three-headed dog Cerberus, the guardian of the underworld. Occasionally, and partially in conjunction with his consort Isis, the greatest Egyptian goddess during the Greek period, both deities could be depicted as serpents with human heads, most often on door jambs, where Serapis would be discernible by his beard. When represented in such a fashion, it was usually in relationship to their aspects related to the netherworld and fertility. So again, lots of gods come together to form this god. Zeus and Helios, Dionysus, Hades and Asclepius, all mashed together with Osiris and Apis. You know, this was really an invented god. Like, clearly an invented god. And it didn't matter. People worshipped it all the same.
Is it the corn, the wheat, and the oil, or is it the corn, the wine, the oil?
It depends on where you're at.
Yeah, I mean, because that's like, you know, when you said, like, you know, the measures of oil, measures of grain, I was like, oh, man, that sounds so familiar.
Doesn't it, though? It all sounds familiar. It all, I mean,
There's like a Masonic ritual, I believe. I think. Yeah, I have to look into it.
And as we mentioned, the chief center of worship of Serapis in Ptolemaic times was Alexandria at the Great Serapeum, which was considered a wonder and a site of pilgrimage throughout the Mediterranean world, until it was destroyed by order of Emperor Theodosius in 389 AD. The Serapeum which Ptolemy repaired or founded was probably around Rhacotis near Pompey's Pillar and was very remarkably built. Interestingly enough, Rhacotis was a small Egyptian village that had been located on the site of what would become Alexandria, and some traditions hold that Osiris was the local god. The temple's main plan seems to have resembled that of the famous Serapeum at Memphis, but parts of it were richly painted and gilded, and it possessed a fine library which was said to contain some 300,000 or perhaps as many as 42,000 volumes. The library was actually an annex of the Great Library of Alexandria, and hence known as the Daughter Library. Within the temple was a specific and famous statue of Serapis. How the statue came to Alexandria at this temple is of some interest. Tradition holds that while Ptolemy was considering the possibility of a hybrid god to unite the Egyptians and Greeks, he had a dream wherein a colossal statue of some god appeared to him and bid the king remove it to Alexandria. According to Plutarch, he had never seen a similar statue, and he knew neither the place where it stood nor whom it belonged to. One day, he happened to mention his dream to Eusebius and describe the statue which he had seen, whereon this man declared that he had seen a statue like it at Sinope. Tradition says that this was Sinope on the Pontius, and adds that the inhabitants of the city were extremely unwilling to part with their statue of its own accord. After waiting for 3 years, it entered into a ship and arrived at Alexandria safely after a voyage of only 3 days. However, others provide that after 3 years of fruitful negotiations, Ptolemy's men simply stole it, claiming that it had boarded the boat on its own. So the legend goes the statue either walked onto the boat and left on its own, or Ptolemy's men stole it and said that it walked on the boat on its own.
It walked on the boat on its own.
Hey, I don't know what you're talking about. It walked on the boat on its own over here.
I didn't see nothing.
right.
Hey, if he said it walked on the boat, it walked on the boat.
You call me a lot? You asking me about my business?
Scan detected.
There were other smaller temples and shrines dedicated to this god in various locations throughout Egypt, but the god's cult was also spread throughout much of the Roman Greco world by traders and other converts. Another notable cult center was the Greek holy site of Delos, which was founded by an Egyptian priest in the 3rd century. There was even a Roman period sculpted head of Serapis, dating to the 2nd or early 3rd century AD, discovered in London at the Walbrook Mithraea. A temple of Serapis is mentioned in an inscription found at the Roman site of Eboracum, which is modern York in the United Kingdom. Hence, he was even important enough to reach the most distant areas of the Roman Empire. Interestingly, however, Serapis never received wide acclaim in Egypt himself, where other more traditional Egyptian deities continued to receive more popular worship. The Serapis may have finally had certain ties with the early Christian community. There were certainly some similarities between Serapis and the Hebrew god. Serapis was a supreme god, and it seems that some early worshippers of Christ among the Gentiles could have possibly worshipped Serapis purposefully or confusing him with Christ, though the confusion seems to more likely have been one of language. A correspondence of Emperor Hadrian refers to Alexandrian worshippers of Serapis calling themselves bishops of Christ. Egypt, which you commanded to me, my dearest Saravenius, I have found to be wholly fickle and inconsistent, and continually wafted about by every breath of fame. The worshippers of Serapis here are called Christians, and those who are devoted to the god Serapis, I find, call themselves bishops of Christ. This is what Hadrian said to Saravenius in 134 AD. It, in fact, appears that some followers of Serapis were eventually expelled from Rome when in 19 AD, Tiberius expelled the Jewish people. Nevertheless, how great confusion between Serapis and Christ could have existed is really somewhat questionable. In AD 68, a mob of pagans is said to have formed at the Serapis Temple on Alexandria, who then descended on Christians who were celebrating Easter at Bacchus. There, they seized St. Mark, dragging him through the streets before throwing him in prison. Clearly, those worshippers of Serapis and Christ were aware of each other and the differences within their religion, though perhaps at a later date, some amongst the worshippers of either may have chosen to cover all their options. On the other hand, some have pointed out that Christus was another name for the Egyptian god Serapis. Christus may be translated as Messiah, though the term does not apply to any specific Messiah such as Jesus. It therefore could have simply been applied to Lord Serapis, so that in fact there was never any connection at all between early Christians and the worshippers of Serapis. I'm glad that came up because there are similarities, mostly in appearance. If I was to say, hey, everybody, let's take a look at something here. Let's take a look at I want to give you a visual aid here. So there we go. This is what I'm looking at. So if I said to you, hey, everybody, who's this a picture of?
Christ.
Exactly, but it's not.
Yeah.
It's Serapis.
Mm-hmm.
So who knows if there was some confusion in the ancient world where things weren't translating too well by peoples and places, where there were guys that were confused. Obviously, there were times when people weren't confused. You had the pagans descend on the Christians and grab St. Mark and throw him into jail, and you have the Christians come by later and burn down the fucking Serapeum to the ground.
Yeah.
So
Well, one thing that a lot of people tend to overlook when looking at the history is like during Constantine's reign, and they're like, okay, we're all Christian now. It's like, okay, well, no graven images. What about all these statues? Like, oh no, they're not gods anymore. They're saints. And so they start naming things like Peter and everything else, Jesus, and like taking all the statues of like all the different gods and goddesses and proclaiming them to be certain saints or apostles or things like that. So that's why we have the typical image of the, you know, the Caucasian Jesus with the beard and the long straight hair, where would be a little bit more wavy. The skin tone would be a little bit more tannish. I mean, if we're going on a historical thing, so that lies a lot of the confusion with the different statues and paintings, depictions of other gods.
It looks like he had a flower pot and Christ had a halo. That's the difference.
Or God of Thorns.
Yes.
Could be,
Mecca.
yeah.
Yeah, Mecca. Well,
It looks very dry up there, though.
Yeah, what is around his head now?
That around his head in this depiction appears to me, I'm not an expert on this, but appears to me not only the measure for grain that is depicted on his top of his head at all times, but I would assume that behind him would be either the wreaths of a laurel or perhaps grain itself.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
Osiris was very associated with grain.
Uh-huh.
So to see Serapis associated with grain isn't that crazy.
He does have Borat eyes, Dr. Bolden.
There was a couple of gods that had the wreath laurel.
Well, yeah.
I believe. I think Odin was one of them. Let's see. Drawing a blank here. I want to say possibly Nimrod or Tammuz.
I want to point out that it wouldn't be weird for Roman gods to be depicted with halos. In Hellenistic and Roman art, the sun god Helios and Roman emperors often appear with crowns of rays. But because of its pagan origins, this form was avoided in early Christian art. So in the earliest Christian art, there are no halos. But from the middle of the 4th century, Christ was shown with the imperial attribute of a nimbus, which was adopted by Christian emperors for their official portraits. So the nimbus was a simple circular halo.
Right.
Not as ordinate as you would see during the medieval period. So when you think of medieval and Renaissance art and you see the halos around them, that is a little different than, say, this image here. Let's look at this. So this is an image I'm going to show you of Justinian, who was an emperor. And you can see around Justinian's head the simple nimbus.
Yeah.
Right. So since he was a Christian emperor, he had his official portrait appear with a nimbus. Then later on, this was adopted by Christian artists and became the halo that we would see in the Middle Ages and the Renaissance period. But Helios was depicted with a halo. The sun god.
Okay.
So the halo, not a new thing in art by any means.
No.
Very old, going back to the Greeks and Romans. A lot of this stuff comes from the Greeks and Romans. So it's undeniable.
Yeah.
And now, let's see what else we got here.
Cargo scoop retracted.
In the city, on the borders of Egypt, which boasts Alexander of Macedonia as its favorite, Serapis and Isis are worshipped with a reverence that is almost fanatical. Evidence that the sun under the name Serapis is an object of all this reverence is either a basket set on the head of it, or a figure with a 3-headed creature placed by his statue. This was from Macrobius in Saturnalities. Lucius Alpinius, who was born in North Africa, relates the only surviving Latin novel, A Dream, in which Isis revealed all of her manifestations. All the perfumes of Arabia flowed into my nostrils as the goddess designed to me. You see me here, Lucinus, in answer to your prayers. I am nature, universal mother, mistress of all elements, primordial child of time, sovereign of all things spiritual, queen of the dead, queen also of the immortals, the single manifestation of all the gods and goddesses that are. Though I am worshipped in many aspects, known by countless names, I am the proprietor with all the manner of different rites. Yet the whole round earth venerates me. Call me by my true name, namely Queen Isis.
Say my name, bitch.
Ptolemy I also founded the Great Library of Alexandria, which may have been adjacent to the museum and was greatly augmented by his son Ptolemy II Philadelphus. The collection was supplemented by an annex in the Temple of Serapis, or in the precinct around it, which was built by Ptolemy III Eucrates. Thus, daughter library was said to have contained more than 42,000 scrolls. The last of the Ptolemies, Cleopatra VII, was defeated at Actium in 31 BC, failing to beguile Octavian as she had Mark Antony and Caesar, taking her life the next year. John Chrysostom, in his homily against the Jews, writes that you may know that the sacred books do not make a place holy, but that the purpose of those who frequent a place does make it profane. And that was from Adversius Judaeus. The colossal marble bust of Serapis was found in 1771 and sold to the Louvre by the British dealer Gavin Hampton. On the head of the god is called a calathus or modus, a basket of grain measure that held about a quarter of a bushel, symbolizing the fertility and bounty of the earth and an association with Osiris, the god of grain. Binding the hair is a plated band, which once held 7 bronze rays that associate Serapis with the sun god. The bust is dated to the end of the 2nd century AD and is patterned after the cult statue in the Serapeum made about 320 to 310 BC when the new god was first introduced. It was said to have been finished at Byraxis, although not sculpted at the mausoleum at Harcanelius, but a namesake, Clement of Alexandria. Microbius may be the same person to whom an edict of Theodosius I was addressed as Vicar of Spain, directing that the ornaments of public works shall be preserved. Like the Attic Nights of Aelius Galenius, from which he quotes, the Saturnalia is a collection of excerpts and anecdotes on a variety of subjects presented as a conversation, in this case, among a number of eminent Roman pagans, including Simanticus. So again, Serapius in the Serapeum with his basket on his head, share another image here. This is the bust that was recovered and sold to the Louvre. It's the one I used for the thumbnail tonight. So we see there the ancient god Serapis. And again, if you're looking to revive a dead religion, this might be the one for you.
And he's like 12 foot tall.
The statue was 12 feet tall.
Yeah.
But I would assume that Greek gods were probably pretty big.
Yeah.
You know, I'm assuming if Zeus showed up, he'd probably be pretty tall.
I would think so, yeah.
I mean, how imposing would Zeus be if he was 5'5"?
Right.
You know, I am Almighty Zeus.
Sure you are.
Dude, you're 5'5".
No,
Yeah, sure you are, Napoleon.
Right.
What are you trying to prove?
Zeus needs to have a commanding presence because otherwise, how would he get all those women?
That's true.
He'd change into an animal and deceive them.
Maybe fucking animals.
Yeah.
He turns into a goose at one point.
Really?
Yeah. That's silly. Goose.
Getting goosed.
Dennis Martin says, demon I am and face I feel. See your skin inside out. Gotta have you on my wall. Gotta have you on my wall. Dennis Martin, I want your skull. I need your skull.
Yeah.
See, Pete and I both went there with like the first 3 words. You're doing I am. That's exactly where I go.
See, to me, this is a very interesting god. I think that, you know, the very Greek appearance of an Egyptian god, he's so unique among Egyptian gods, you know, and very little heard of. You know, when you think of Egyptian gods, you're not thinking Serapis. You're not thinking a guy that looks like Jesus with a flower pot on his head.
No.
Generally, you think of the big hitters. You think of Horus. You think of Ra. You think of Set and Thoth. You know, You think of Anubis is a popular one. You know, these animal-headed gods. That's what we
Yeah.
assume
Yeah.
when we think Egyptian gods, not Serapis, and that's why he really stands out. That's why he stands out for me. Now, I do have some more information here from the book The Gnostics and Their Remains by Charles William King. This was written in 1887, and this chapter here, or this small excerpt, focuses on the worship of Serapis. And let me share this with you now. The next great series of monuments to be considered are those emanating from the worship of Serapis, that mysterious deity who, under his varying forms, has during the 2nd and 3rd centuries of our era completely usurped the sovereignty of his brother Jupiter and reduced him to the ranks of a mere planetary genius. Unlike the generalities of the deities who figure upon the Gnostic stones, the Alexandrian Serapis does not belong to the primitive mythologies of Egypt. His worship may be said to only co-evolve with the rise of Alexandria, into which the city was introduced from Sinope by the first Ptolemy, and in consequence of the command and repeated threats, in case of neglect, of a vision which had appeared to him. After 3 years of ineffectual negotiation, Ptolemy at last obtained the god from the king of Sinope, but when the citizens still refused to part with their idol, a report was spread that it had spontaneously found its way from the temple down to the Egyptian ships lying in the harbor. Again, the statue walked there itself. The prevalent opinion among the Greeks was that the figure represented Jupiter Dis, and that this one by the side Proserpine. The latter, the envoys were ordered by the same divine messenger to leave it in its native shrine. Another story, also mentioned by Tacitus, made the statue to have been brought by Seleucia by Ptolemy III, but this rested on slighter authority. It is, however, a curious confirmation of this last tradition that Serapis is named by Plutarch as the chief deity of Babylon at the date of the Macedonian conquest, a proof that he at least regarded that god as identical to Belus. Now, it is a remarkable coincidence that Anna, the first person in the primitive Chaldean triad, is likewise king of the lower world, and that his symbol, the vertical wedge, stands also for the numeral 60, which last is often used to express hieroglyphically the name Anna. It was Timotheus, an Athenian Emolipid, and in virtue of his descent, diviner to the king, who indicated Pontius as the residence of an unknown god, whose apparition had so disquieted the monarch by commanding him to be sent for without declaring whence. The figure seen in the vision was that of a youth, a circumstance that tallies ill with the mature majesty of the great gods of Alexandria. But the Helios Dionysios, a veritable Krishna, who graces the reverse of the gold medallion of Parnacles II, coined at Sinope in the following century, agrees much more exactly with this depiction of the nocturnal visitor. So to recap where we are so far, the whole reason this exists is to unite these two peoples. But the backstory to it is there was a dream. And in a dream, this unknown god commands the Ptolemaic king to go get a statue and bring it to Alexandria. The problem is he doesn't know what the statue looks like. He doesn't know where the statue is. But the dream has him so messed up, he can't stop thinking about it. Then he finds out the statue is supposed to be in Sinope. So for 3 years, he makes negotiations with the king of Sinope to try and get this statue and bring it back to Alexandria. This is what he needs. He needs to unite these peoples religiously. And he needs this statue to do it. But he's also haunted by this vision of a dream where an unknown god has commanded him to do something. So when he can't get the statue, he just fucking steal it. And how speedily did Serapis become the sole lord of his new home. And speculations as to his true nature employed the ingenuity of philosophers at Alexandria, down to the times when they were superseded by the discussions on the doctrine of the Trinity, wanged with equal zeal but infinitely worse temper. Every conflicting religion strove to claim him as a grand representative of their own doctrine. Macrobius has preserved one of the most ingenious of these interpretations, as made by the rationalists, a party so strong among later Greeks, the city of Alexandria almost played a fanatical worship to Serapis and Isis. Nevertheless, they show that all this veneration is merely offered to the sun under that name, both by placing their corn measure upon his head and by accompanying his statue with the figure of an animal having 3 heads. Of these heads, the middle of the largest one is a lion, that which rises on the right is a dog in a peaceable and fawning attitude, while on the left part of the neck terminates in that of a ravening wolf. All these bestial forms are connected together by the withered body of a serpent, which rises its head towards the god's right hand, on which side the monster is placed. The lion head typifies the present, because its condition between the past and future is strong and fervent. The past is signified by the wolf's head, because the memory of all things past is scratched away from us and utterly consumed. The emblem of the fawning dog represents the future, the domain of inconsistent and faltering hope. But whom should past, present, and future serve except their authors? His head is crowned with a calathus, typifying the height of the planet above us. Also, his all-powerful capio consciousness, since unto him all earthly things do return, being drawn up by the heat he emits. Moreover, when Nicocreon, tyrant of Cyprus, consulted Serapis as to which of the gods he ought to be accounted, he received the following response: A god I am, such as I show thee. Starry heavens my head, my trunk the sea. Earth forms my feet, mine ears the air supplies. The sun's far darting, brilliant rays, mine eyes. From all this is evident that the nature of Serapis and the sun is one and indivisible. Again, Osiris is usually worshipped as the type of earth or nature in subjection to the sun. For this cause, the body of the goddess is covered with continuous rows of udders, to declare that the universe is maintained by the perpetual nourishing of the earth or nature. The last curious remark shows that Macrobius regarded the Alexandrians' Isis as the same with the Ephesian Diana, for the ancient Isis of Egypt had only the usual complement of breasts. The philosopher had started with the axiom, Hominos Deus referi ad solium, and begins by demonstrating from the various epithets of Apollo that he was the same god with the one styled the sun. Now let me see what this axiom means. I'd like to understand this a little bit more, so let's rely on terrible translations of Google and see what it says. Pardon me for the dead air. Go ahead. Figure this out. There we go. All the gods are related to the sun. That is the axiom. Tough to argue with that one. Really is tough to argue with that one. All the gods.
That's a TLDR if I ever heard it.
Yeah, for real.
Lesson over.
Well, he then proceeds to prove that the same of Bacchus, Hermes, Asclepius, and Hercules. His ingenious explanation of the serpent entwined rod of Hermes and the club of Asclepius will be found applied further onto the elucidation of the remarkable symbol in the reverse of all the Prometheus amulets. After this, Macrobius passes in review the attributes of the legends of Adonis and Aetius, also of Osiris and Horus, and comes to the same conclusion concerning the real nature of all these personages, adding parenthetically a very fanciful exposition of the signs of the zodiac as being merely so many emblems of the solar influence in several regions of creation: Nemesis, Paris, Saturn, Jupiter, and finally the Assyrian god, are all reduced by him to the same signification. Thus brings us to the most wondrous identification of all, which Hadrian mentions in a letter to his brother-in-law Sirvanius, preserved by the historian Vapisiacus in his Life of the Tyrant Saturninus. Those who worship Serapis are... I'm over here, Amy's in the doorway, and I'm trying to sign language her to go get my cigar cutter for me. Darling, could you grab my cigar cutter for me?
That was grab my cigar cutter?
That was grab my cigar cutter.
That was not.
What did you think that was?
That was like,
Came up with a lighter.
I don't fucking know.
I don't know what you're talking about.
Get your psychic abilities in order there, Amy. Right?
I was trying not to break the immersion.
Oh well, shit happens.
My charade game is weak. Thank you, my God. Just needed my cigar cutter, damn it. Appreciate it. Just wanted to cut this cigar. That's all I needed.
Damn
I
it.
had to mute because I found like the perfect thing for us to watch off stream.
Oh, what do you got?
Somebody synced Bohemian Rhapsody with a roller coaster, and they built a custom roller coaster in Roller Coaster Tycoon 2. It looks like. And it's like they basically built the track into the song, basically, or they built
We're
like.
gonna check that out after the stream.
Nice.
Yeah, you gotta see this. This is fucking amazing.
Milton Knowles, the insane Witch King. You yelled at me for calling you a fancy boy once. Now let's be honest, Milton. You called me a fancy boy a lot more than once.
A lot more than once.
And there you go. Can you grab my cigar cutter, fancy boy? Well, what do you expect me to do? Bite the fucking tip off like a Philistine?
Yeah, you don't do that to a $10 cigar.
Like, come on.
Bite it like a savage.
John Kissel says, "Beat sign and give me circumcision."
Yeah.
That scene on Men in Tights, that rabbi. It's a brisk.
It's a brisk.
It's a brisk.
Shit, that's funny.
All right, there we go.
Yeah, now all is well.
That's hard. I'll be bitching and moaning when I got fucking mouth cancer, though.
No, say that.
Well, it's not like I smoke 3 a day or anything.
No,
You know,
no.
maybe 3 a week.
Yeah.
If that many. I usually just save them for the weekends.
During the stream mainly.
You know,
Yeah. Yeah.
except that first day of working from home. That day I was fucking like, I sat down, I lit a cigar, I was like, I'm working from home.
I would have too. That's great to be able to work from home. Nothing better, I think. You sit there in your pajamas and work. Or your tidy whities, it don't matter.
Or just in the nude.
Or just naked, that's right. Naked.
No, I'm a never nude. I shower in swim trunks.
Really?
I'm not a naked person.
Really?
I'm not a naked person either. I usually have on shorts and a tank top or something. I'm rarely. Well, I can't, you know. People in and out of the house. Shitting at least.
You know, it's all fun and games for nudists until they have to sit down on a leather couch.
Oh my god. Right.
Oh, goodness
I want to think
gracious.
about it. Ryan, damn it. Now I'm reflecting, thank you.
All right, let me reflect on some more of this this Greek god here.
That's a good idea. Thanks, Pete.
Yeah, let's get us off this topic. This brings us to the most wondrous identification of all, which Hadrian mentions in a letter to his brother-in-law Servianus, preserved by the historian Vulpicus in the life of the tyrant Saturninus. Those who worship Serapis are likewise Christians. Even those who style themselves the Bishop of Christ are devoted to Serapis. The very patriarch himself, when he comes to Egypt, is forced by some to adore Serapis, and others to worship Christ. There is but one God for all of them. Him do the Christians, him do the Jews, him do the Gentiles, all worship alike. Serapis Alexander too, who daily paid his devotions to Christ and Abraham, did nonetheless expend large sums in decorating the temples of Serapis and Isis with statues, couches, and all things pertaining to their mysteries, whilst he left the other gods of Rome to take care of themselves. As connected with the same subjects, it may here be observed that conventional portraits of the Savior is in all probability borrowed from the head of Serapis, so full of grave and pensive majesty. One of his first converts, the Jewish delectations, were so powerful that we may be sure that no attempt was made to portray his countenance until many generations after all who had beheld it on earth had passed away. Nonetheless, the importance so long attached to this pretended letter of Lenthinius to the Emperor Tiberius describing Christ's personal appearance demands a notice in this place. Its monkish Latin style betray it. At first sight, from the authorship of some new divine. Yet, incredibly, as it may seem, even a learned man like Gymnanius has been so besotted through his pious longing for the reality of such a record that to persuade himself that Lenthinius, Roman senator and eminent historian, written in the exact praise of a mendicant friar, who has appeared in our times and still lives, a man of great virtue, named Christ Jesus, who was called by the Gentiles a prophet of truth, whom his own disciples call the Son of God, raising the dead, healing disease, a man indeed of lofty stature, handsome, having a venerable countenance, which the beholders can both love and fear. His hair verily somewhat wavy and circling, somewhat brightish and resplendent in color, flowing down upon his shoulders, having a parting in the middle of the head after the fashion of the Nazarenes. This forgery reminds one of Pliny's remark. Platinus Deodustrius Notrastus Vultius Sanctiminius Homereo Evidente. Back to the translator. Let's see what this means. It would be very nice if the author would provide the Latin, but it was 1887. So, having been delivered not the desires of the people, bring forth the look, Cinqueton turned out to Homer. The wish is father to the image of a venerated object, and the conception is too joyfully accepted by the loving conservator to trouble itself overmuch in scrutinizing the legitimacy of the same. For as Marital exclaims with the full truth, quis eminis datium su vota leventur, which translates to, for who is to be condemned with his own desires. But to return to Egypt in the time of Gnosticism, the very focus of that theosophy, the synchronistic sect, which sprang up so brightly there during the first 3 centuries in Rome, had good grounds for making out Serapis and the Christ. Consider as Lord and Maker of all, the Judge of the quick and the dead. The response given to Nico Crete, above quoted, evidences that the philosophers of these saw in Serapis nothing more than the emblem of anima. Anima mundi, the spirit of whom nature's universal is the body and held in the doctrine of God. The harmonious whole whose body nature is the spirit. So by an easy translation, Serapis came to be worshipped as the embodiment of the One Supreme, whose representative was Christ. The very construction of the grand colossus of Serapis ingeniously set forth these ideas in his hand out of plates of all the metals, artfully joined together, to typify the harmonious union of different elements in the fabric of the universe. All moles et machinum mundi. The amount of the machine world. The statue was placed upon the summit of an artificial hill, whose vast interior was divided into vaulted halls containing the famous library. ascended by a flight of 100 steps. The style of building totally diverse from the native Egyptian and the Grecian model, exactly following the Indian usage, as may be seen by the Grand Pagoda of Serva and Dori, or by the topes and Gilgabas of the Buddhists. The remarkable construction of this colossus may reasonably be supposed to have suggested to the Alexandrian Jew who completed the Book of Daniel the notion of the similarity compacted image which figures in Nebuchadnezzar's dream. That this depiction of the latter was penned long after the coming of Serapis into the city is a manifestation of the minute details this prophet gives concerning the constant squabbles going on between Antonicus Epiphanes, Ptolemy Philometor, his nephew, together with the final intervention of the Roman Senate. The popular belief of the Alexandrians, Christian as well as pagans, was that the profanation of this statue would be the signal for heaven and earth's collapse at once to pristine chaos. The notions bearing clear testimony to the grand idea embodied by the figure. At last, however, although this worship, thus defined by deep-rooted fear, had been tolerated by the Christian government long after the other gods of Egypt had been swept away, this wonderful colossus was broken down by the perpetual enemy of peace and virtue, the patriarch Theophanes, the reign of Theodosius, and its mutilated trunk dragged triumphantly through the streets by the mob of rejoicing fanatics, which ultimately buried in the Hippodrome. So they tore down the statue, they drug it through the streets, and they buried it in the Hippodrome.
Didn't walk on its own, huh?
No, this was in the end when the Christians took it down. It walked on its own to get from where it was into the boat so they could bring it to Alexandria, but when the Christians smashed it up, they smashed up the statue, they fucking drug it through the streets, and they buried it.
Damn.
Now, like that of Mithras, the worship of Serapis was widely diffused over the West. A very curious exemplification of this is to be found in Ammonaeus' notices of that of Menderich, king of Ammonelia, when then detained as a hostage in Gaul, being told this reason, for that reason, changed the name of his son Angenerich into Serapion. But Serapis had natural claim to the adoration of the Gauls, who, as Caesar tells us, actually boasted of descent from Dis Pater. A new corner from Sinop does not seem to have brought his name. Ptolemy consulted his own priesthood upon this important point. Manetho boldly identified the Platonic god with their own Osor Apis, chiefly on the score of an attributed Cerberus, which he considered the counterpart of the hippopotamus-headed Typhon, who attends Osor Apis in the character of the sovereign of the lower world. This deity is no other than the bull Apis, who, after death, assumes the figure of Osiris, the regular form of Egyptian apotheosis, and so frequently seen applied to deceased kings. Osor Apis, as he has now become, is depicted as a man with the head of a bull and carrying the ensigns by which we usually recognize Osiris. The god of Alexandria therefore differs in form and widely as in origin from the original patron of Thebes, with whom he has no other affinity than his name, and that rests only in the arbitrary interpretation of the Egyptian priest, so successfully in persuading the Greeks that the mythology as a whole read was plagiarism from their own. M. Marlette in 1860 excavated the Theban Serapeum, as it was called in times, with its long avenue of sphinxes. He also discovered the catacombs where the Apis bulls were deposited after death, and found there no fewer than 60. 2 of their mummies yet reposed and undisturbed. It is amusing to notice how neatly the Greeks turned the Coptic Osar Apis into the more Eponymous Serapis. So I do want to look into this Theban Serapeum, Saqqara, Dozier. August Mariette, who had gone to Egypt to collect Coptic language manuscripts but grew interested in the remains of the Saqqara necropolis. In 1850, Mariette found the head of one of the sphinxes sticking out of the shifting desert dunes. Clearing the sand, he followed the boulevard to the site. After using explosives to clear rocks blocking the entrance to the catacomb, he excavated most of the complex. Unfortunately, his notes of excavation were lost, which has complicated the use of these burials in establishing the Egyptian chronology. Mariette found one undisturbed burial, which is now at the Agricultural Museum in Cairo. The other 24 sarcophagi of the bulls have been robbed.
Sucks.
Well, that's pretty rad that, you know, you're down there and found, you know, these sphinxes sticking out of the sand.
Yeah, right?
Sphinx heads
Definitely.
sticking out of the sand, and you cleared it away and you find the serapium. And here's just a rank of the sphinxes here in the Louvre Museum. So this is how they would have been lined up along towards the temple. Yeah, definitely. We also have this image here of the Apis. I've talked about it and how it showed one of the so let's take a look at the statue of the Apis. This was from the Louvre. This came from the Serapeum of Saqqara.
Oh, okay.
So as you can see, in the Serapeum, the Apis bull was present. You know, because as far as they were concerned, the Apis was Osiris. And Osiris was Serapis. Serapis Apis.
Okay.
Osirapis. And that's how it all comes together.
There you have it.
Yeah.
That's you know, when I think about it, this guy, he's kind of like the Kilroy character, just shows up everywhere.
Oh, yeah.
But not so long, only for a couple hundred years.
Right, but the Kilroy was, you know, about about 50, 60 years though.
That's true. Kilroy is a newer phenomenon.
Yeah.
You know, but you do have Apis. He does appear as far away as Great Britain, which is astonishing to see Serapis descend that far. NRG Daymoon, you guys do some cool topics. Thank you, NRG Daymoon. Do appreciate that. We try to do good topics every night. I try to cover new and interesting, old and ancient, unexplained and mysterious, as far as we can go. That's what we do here. Night after night, day after day, delve into the world of weird. Dr. Foreman Class is $20. Thank you, Dr. Foreman Class. Very generous of you. Will this help? Absolutely. I really do appreciate that. Thank you so much. That's 2 cigars right there. The Colossus of Rhodes was Helios, was he not? Yes, the Colossus, or was it Apollo? I don't know if he was Apollo or Helios. He was one or the other. You know, you're right. He was Helios. I confused it with Apollo, was also a sun god. That's why the confusion there. The Colossus of Rhodes. Could one imagine the grandeur of the Colossus of Rhodes? All we have are artist depictions, but the Colossus stood 108 feet high.
Wow.
It was built on the Greek island of Rhodes in 280 BC. It was the approximate height of the modern Statue of Liberty from feet to crown, making it the tallest statue of the ancient world. It collapsed during an earthquake in 226 BC. Although parts of it were preserved in accordance with a certain oracle, the Rhodesians did not build it again. The Colossus of Rhodes. Can you imagine? Straddling the entrance to the harbor, standing as tall as the Statue of Liberty. It stood for 54 years until the earthquake. The remains of it laid on the ground, described by Strabos, for 800 years. And even broken, they were so impressive that many traveled to see them. Pliny the Elder remarked that few people could wrap their arms around the fallen thumb, and that each of its fingers were larger than most statues. In 653 AD, an Arab force under the Muslim Caliph Muawiyah I captured Rhodes, and guess what they did?
4, 3,
They melted the fucker down.
Dumbasses.
They melted it down and they sold it.
Hate
Who
that
loaded the
shit.
bronze on 900 camels.
Sure. Damn, man. Why? Why would you do that?
That's the way of the world.
I mean, how can you not marvel at something like that? I mean, what would possess you to say, let's take it down? I just,
But at least they sold it, right?
I guess, but what a shame, man.
I mean, it's one thing, you know, like, okay, yeah, let's destroy something, and then it's just completely senseless. Like, oh, but hey, that's worth something that's made out of so and so, so let's melt it down and sell it. I could respect that more.
I just hate it. I hate when they tear shit down.
Ladies and gentlemen, Crystal McGee's here. What's up, Crystal McGee? Good to see
Yeah.
you.
Crystal.
Hope you're doing well.
There's a girl, Crystal. Crystal in the house. We
Lost
missed
my
you.
chat.
Oh no.
Oh, I have a game on one window or one monitor, and then I have Streamlabs half screen, and then I have the chat half screen.
Okay.
But also on that tab, I have like Twitter and all kinds of other shit, and a video that I got.
That's
Too
what
many tabs.
window.
Too many tabs.
Oh yeah.
Well, I only have 4. No, 5. I only have 5.
We only have 15.
Pretty good. I'm having a game today. Because I didn't have time to do shit today because I was working all day. And not even like getting any work done working, just like getting.
Oh, Ginger Viking Jesus for $5. Thank you, Ginger Viking Jesus. Much appreciated. Ginger Viking Jesus says, I'll take care of the tax on them cigars. Antediluvian. Oh, we got an antediluvian. Everybody. For those of you playing the game at home, every time we mention the word antediluvian, we recommend you take a sip of your soda pop or whatever it is you're imbibing on this evening. So for those of you who are enjoying an adult beverage, go ahead and have a sip of your drink. And those of you who are teetotaling, go ahead and have a drink of whatever you're having tonight. That's how we play the game.
Sip my coffee.
Thank you again, Ginger Viking Jesus. Much appreciated. I do love my cigars.
I want to try one.
Did you get yourself one, Tina?
I will.
Oh, I'm just realizing what time it is, everybody. It's time to wrap it up here. This did go by quick tonight. Very, very, very quickly it did it. You know what? I think I'm gonna. How about we just hang out until I finish the cigar? Because I don't feel like.
There you go.
It's Saturday.
Yeah, it's Saturday.
Saturday
I did
night.
see the
It's
comments
Saturday.
to extend the stream a little bit. No, I can oblige. You know, some people just got here. Now, I did run out of topic for you, though, so we're probably just going to talk about nothing from this point here on out. So if you've been here this long,
Corn.
I do appreciate you being here. Well,
Yeah,
we knocked that out at the beginning of the stream.
No bitching. No
I
bitching about it.
did order a new pipe.
Did that come in?
Supposed to get here Wednesday. Just got the UPS
Okay.
tracking information. Supposed to get
Okay.
in Wednesday. Are you guys familiar with Grav Labs at all?
It's a cool pipe too, by the way.
Yeah, Grav Labs. It's their Sherlock Poker. Beautiful little pipe. Let me see if I got the phone. Find it. Well, you know what? I'll wait until I got it to show it to you guys.
There
If I
you
show you a picture of it now, you know what's.
Yeah.
But I haven't treated myself to a new piece in a while.
I think you always the snake thing on the wall.
No. I mean like a glass piece.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah. No, I did get the Aztec snake back here. That. I'm not talking artwork. I'm talking like pipe.
What was it your son called it?
Pretzel snake.
A pretzel snake. I think that's so
Pretzel
cute.
snake. Call it a pretzel snake.
He's right though. It looks like
You
a
know,
pretzel snake.
there's an idea. You know, when you open up your pizzeria or bakery or whatever it is you're gonna do, you can make pretzel snakes.
That's right. I can make Ouroboros pretzel snakes eating their own tail.
There you go, Pete.
Bob S. Massive stash attack. Yeah, dude. You like it? Right? Look at this thing. Look at this fucking thing. Well, you know what? I haven't seen anybody in months, so what do you expect? It's the summer stash, dude. It's the summer stash. Just got the stash going. There's a little gray in it. I'm gonna do some Just for Men comb in there, make it black as night. I want to look like Groucho Marx over here.
You know, with that cigar.
You know, come on, take off that fake mustache. Let's hit the town.
That's right. Screw you, Tom Selleck. Look what Pete's got.
That's right, Selleck time. Milton Knowles. Pete is the fanciest man in the world. Ripley's believe it or not. I'm not the fanciest man in the world, Milton Knowles. I just like what I like. There's nothing wrong with that.
That's right. He likes what he likes.
I like
Damn
pieces
it.
of occult and like artwork and reproductions of ancient things. I like cigars. I like Irish whiskey.
And believe it or not, Milton, he likes you too. So there. Milton
There
always
you go.
Pete don't like me. I'm like, yes, he does.
Bob's saying no. Just no to the stash. Summer of stash, dude. Summer of stash.
You know, you
By the way,
could.
did you go to the Batman drive-in thing? No, you couldn't have gone to the Batman drive-in thing unless you're sitting there now. What time is it? Yeah. Because I know they had the Batman drive-in thing going on. I don't know if you would or not.
That's right
Yeah.
now.
You know, Pete, you could get a green hat, and if you keep the stash through Halloween, you could be Luigi from the Mario Brothers.
I'm not tall enough to be Luigi. And I'm not fat enough to be Mario. Milton Knowles, look at Pete showing off his fancy nose caterpillars. Next thing you know, he's going to show off his fancy eyebrow caterpillars. Greek likes the stash. Thank you, Greek. I like the stash too. Tom Selleck, Tom Sad Brother. Tim Selleck, Tom Sad Brother. Yes, I am not Tim Selleck, Tom Sad Brother. I am.
That's fucked up. That's not right at all.
You rat bastard.
You rat bastard. Yep.
See, what you guys don't know is Bob S is my best friend, and I grew up with this asshole. That's what you guys don't know. So he's over here taking the piss out of me right now.
That's funny.
Oh God, classic case of mustache envy.
I think so, definitely.
Bob's got a beard.
He's probably got a
Bob's beard
mustache
guy.
too, then, right?
Got a mustache.
He's got to have a mustache too.
He's
though,
got a
right?
full beard though. It's a full beard. A full beard's not the
Yeah.
same as a mustache. You got a big cojones to walk around with a mustache.
Damn Skippy.
Dennis Martin, fuck it. Start rapping, Pete. Just start right now. Start rapping. Just start rapping. Let me just start freestyling. Aya Pillars says Transcendent Cthulhu Overlay. Thank you, Transcendent. Aya Pillars, yes. The mating dance of the caterpillars.
Oh shit.
Goodness gracious.
My mustache doesn't connect with my goatee, my beard at all.
No.
No matter how much I try.
You got to rub a little Rogaine in between the empty spaces.
No, thank you.
Do it. Just don't get it on your hands.
Oh my god. My hairy
Otherwise,
palms.
people will think you're a serial masturbator.
Yeah, that's right. I was gonna say, yeah, hairy palms.
Rap about it, Pete, says Dennis Martin. Let it rip, yeah. Rap about it. I don't have any raps. I'm sorry. I'm not talented enough for that. I'll rap about eyebrows and fucking occult figures. Talk about Wazadu the Wizard over here. Speaking of Wazadu the Wizard, tomorrow night, if you guys missed out on last night where we talked about Sanat Kumara, tomorrow night we'll be talking about Master Jesus Sananda.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so that's kind of in the same vein as Sanat Kumara, but there's a lot of information to cover when it comes to Jesus Sananda, who's basically Jesus from the Bible, but an alien.
Okay. We like aliens.
Yeah, he's an alien. Ashtar Galactic Command, get into all that again. We'll touch on that stuff.
S-A-N, Sananda, A-N-D-A, right?
Yeah, Jesus Sananda. Or Master Jesus. Do it, man. Just start rapping. Dennis Martin, I don't rap. What am I gonna rap about? Just start rapping? People don't just start rapping.
Thing you look like Bob from Bob's Burgers.
Everybody's just jealous of the stash. I shave my palms daily, says Transcendent Cthulhu Overlay. That's rough. You gotta lather up your palms and shave them down.
Oh my god.
Oh God. All right.
Show's out of control.
That's okay. I'm finished this thing now. We'll wrap it all up. Got an extra 10 minutes tonight, everybody. I do appreciate you sticking around with us. Well, I mean, we lost like 20 people, but they didn't want to hear it. The topic was done. They were done. Like, fuck this, I'm out. That's all right. Well, listen, everybody, tune in tomorrow night. We'll be talking about Jesus Sananda, Master Jesus, one of the Ascended Masters. This will relate to what we talked about last night when we talked about Sanat Kumara. So if you're interested in the theosophical version of Jesus, come check that out. I love weird occult versions of Jesus because it's funny and it's fun. And, you know, the stuff that people cook up is just far out, man. It's just far out. So listen, I want to thank you all so much for tuning in. Really appreciate you being here with us night after night, day after day, as we delve into the world of the weird. I want to say thank you to Supermaster Juice. Wait a minute. I missed one from Dash Fat Bastard. I'm sorry, Dash.
Yeah.
Dash said, now I'm wondering if Brian's sister tastes like soap. What?
Cilantro.
Oh, wow. That was at the beginning.
Yeah, that's way at the beginning. Sorry about that, Dash. Totally missed that one. Really apologize for that. So I want to say thank you to Supermaster Juice, Dash Fat Bastard, Deranged Lunatic, Joseph Aldred, Dr. Forbin Colossus for $2 and for $20. Thank you very much. And Ginger Viking Jesus, thank you very much. I do appreciate you one and all. Never expected, always appreciated. Thank you so very much. Thank you to my panel for being here tonight. Guys, check out the description of this video. You'll find links to my Twitter and my email if you got scary stories to share and you'd like me to make videos about it. You will find a link to the Teespring store. Lots of great designs on there. And if you're worried that my stuff has creepy little book all over it, most of it doesn't. Most of the designs stand on their own. I'm not really trying to advertise the channel with the t-shirts. I'm just trying to express myself artistically and provide apparel that has, you know, obscure occult figures that you might be interested in rocking on your clothes. So check that out. And, you know, like I said, we don't have a huge lady audience here, but there are some tank tops for the ladies in there. The newest ones feature both Mithra in the form of Boundless Time and the Abraxas, the Unknowable God, both in the art styles of J.A. Knapp. So I hope you guys will check that out and see if you guys like anything on there.
And I got the Creeping It Real one.
Oh, you got Creeping It Real. That's a new one, too. There's Creeping It Real. That's
three
another
of them now. Yeah. I like them.
So check that stuff out. Don't forget to subscribe here and subscribe to the panel down below. You'll find links to all their channels down there in the description of this video. And as we do, this has been the Creepy Little Book Live, and you've been listening to High Strangeness, the #1 late night paranormal podcast on YouTube. I'm your host, Pete, and with me tonight were Brian the Observer, Mecha Random 42, and Tina Tomazuski. And until tomorrow night, everybody, stay creeped out.
Flight assist on.